If your kids come home from, or if someone's child comes home from school one day and says, I might do agriculture or horticulture at university next year, the mother's going to say, I'll break your bloody leg first, which is just unfortunate. You know, it's an attitude we've got to get past. We've got to start selling the positive. We've got to institute the training programs, the technical and the supervisory programs that we need for our labour to be better, able for work. And I suppose my final slide is the only positive thing about it, that always remember that Barcelona, that just won the European Cup or whatever it won, takes its trainees in at the age of 11. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks very much, Tim. Tim was a bit concerned that it might be all doom and gloom, and I don't think it is, because obviously there are some big issues up there, but I think you're also pointing the way that there are things that we can do to find some solutions within our broader industry. So thanks, Tim, and we will take questions and comments at the end of the presentations. Our next presenter is Summer Antico, and again it's my pleasure to introduce Summer. We've known each other for some time in her role as Operations and QA Manager for Antico International, which is a Sydney-based company that's exporter, importer, and also has a wholesaling business. And again, Summer is one of those people that while she's now back in the family business, or she's in the family business, went outside in terms of the things that she did, in terms of how she's qualified, working for, I think, real estate development company, working for Merchant Bank or one of the banks before coming back into the produce industry. So please welcome Summer Antico.
Hi everyone. I don't have any slides, and unfortunately I don't know any magic tricks either, so I'm just going to have to tell you a few stories and give you a bit of a history of where I come from and my connection to Antico International. So basically our company has been around for about 50 years, and it started back in the day as the typical Italian immigrant story as a fruit shop. It was based in Mascot, and they had my grandfather working there and my father and about 6 of his siblings. They were there for approximately 15 years before they decided to make the transition into the wholesale market, which in those days was in Haymarket in Sydney. They were there for another 15 or so years before they started to get involved in export. And how that came about was they used to supply Qantas with their in-flight catering, which back in those days was all done in-house. And they also had a few customers down at the ship stores, and a few logistical people got together, and once the markets opened to Asia back in the 70s, they were one of the first companies that were given air freight access to take off and start the Australian export trade, which was really the beginning of the days back then. They were primarily exporters for the next 20 years, when probably about 10 years ago they decided to diversify into importing, as well as going back in and concentrating more on the wholesale market, which is what we do today. So we like to say we're importers, exporters and wholesalers. We're not into retail. There are a couple of stores that do carry our name, and they are relatives of ours, but never actually been any one-on-one connection. My entry into the industry, as a lot of people would have the same story, is I obviously grew up with a family connection, and I used to spend my school holidays coming in, getting rides on forklifts and playing around with the trucks and things, eating whatever lovely berries were hanging around at the time, and never really took it too seriously. I was adamant I was going to go out and make it on my own, do something different. I also have 2 older brothers, and they were basically along the same path, never really been seriously involved. And so I did, and I went out and I went to university. I worked for a property developer, and then I was in retail banking, as John said. And I went in for a 3-month maternity leave contract to fill in and help out for a lady that was on leave, and that was almost 10 years ago, and I'm still there. So somehow I managed to get roped in, and the funny thing was, at the beginning I used to wander around and sort of think, what am I doing here? This is only temporary. I never really understood the progression or, the pathway I was meant to take. And I do think that that's a common problem with a lot of young people in our industry, that it's not an obvious pathway for most people. They don't really know where to begin and the steps to go through in order to basically end up with a company that these days can take you all over the world. You can be in all different types of areas, such as marketing and innovation, all sorts of things that back in the day when my father was involved heavily, people didn't even think about. So the industry has changed so much, and I don't think those new advancements are out there for people of my generation, that they really understand what is actually available to them as far as opportunities. I like being in the industry now for a few different reasons. Obviously, I have a sense of pride, and I like the history that I'm involved with. The good thing about my job is that it's different every day. I come in, I never really know exactly what I'm going to face. You can put your hand into all sorts of different areas, whether it's talking to growers, talking to customers, dealing with supermarkets, accounting, marketing, all sorts of different facets that I believe that when you're in a corporate or more corporate structured role, that you can't jump from one to the other as easily as what you might like in order to keep your day varied. And that's definitely something that appeals to me, because you never really know where you're going to end up, and you can end up doing a whole different bunch of other opportunities that you wouldn't have thought originally were even open to. What I don't like about the industry is the hours. I think everybody here knows how tough that can be. It's not that good on your social life, I can tell you that, as a young person. Also, the lack of formal structure. Coming from a corporate background, I'm used to being in an environment where you have regular meetings, you know where you're going in a 3-year, 5-year plan. There are steps put in place to work towards that, and everyone is working to a common goal. I think in the produce industry, because it can be so different in so many, so quickly, things can change overnight. You might be planning for a crop to come on in 2 weeks' time, and all of a sudden you get a hailstorm and it's all wiped out, and you've got to go back and start again. It's very hard to actually plan for things like that, and especially coming from a traditional family company where forward thinking and strategic advancement was not the typical skills that people like my father traditionally had. It's something they've had to pick up along the way. So that for someone who had that background and to come into an industry where you're kind of just thrown into the middle and you never really know what's going to hit you, it can be a little bit daunting. And at the same time, it can be a good thing to help you and advance forward. But like I said, it's can definitely cause a lot of confusion. The other issue I think that we have as far as an industry is the lack of awareness of what we actually do. The biggest problem I have is people just don't know what it takes to get a product from the farm into a store or into their home. My friends have got no idea, the level of the logistics and the planning and the implications of weather, and they don't know. And I don't think it's because they're necessarily silly or ignorant. They just have never been told. It's not something that you learn in school. I think there was an article recently they interviewed some little kids about where does milk come from, and they said the supermarket. That was their answer. They didn't even think about the farm level and the fact that it comes from cows. And I think that's amazing. And a lot of people are the same with their fruit and veg. They just don't understand the the pathways going from the farm level all the way to the store. That's something I think that they need to address maybe at a younger age in schools, and really take people back to the basics, I suppose, of where it's coming from. The classic question I get every year is, do you guys close over Christmas? And I always laugh and I sort of say, well, do you guys like to eat? Because where do you think your food comes from? Especially at such a time when there's so many wonderful fruits out there that, that's our busiest time of year. And again, I just think people just don't think about it, and they're just not aware of the work that goes in behind the scenes. That's also, I guess, related to the pathways that people are not aware to take. If you were somebody that wanted to get into marketing and look, to an innovative product, unfortunately, fresh fruit and veg is not the first thing that comes into their mind. If you look at the words agricultural and horticultural, I mean, to be honest, they sound really old-fashioned. If I was to say those words to my friends, and are you interested in working in that industry, they just assume that's something on the farm. And not to take away from the farmers, I know that is obviously a very important part of the process. But that's not the bit that you need to be selling to people like me. Because to me, that sounds something that happened 30, 40 years ago, and you're leaving out the most interesting part of the process, which is what you can do with that product once it actually gets into the market. So I believe that's where we need to put more focus and actually let people know what they can do in an industry such as ours. If you're going to a university day or those student days they do at high schools, it's not the horticultural area that should be focusing on recruiting. I think you need to go to a marketing department, you need to go to the kids that are coming out of business management courses and target those guys, because they're the ones that don't know that there is this whole other industry out there where they can use their skills. So that's also a way of bringing in some fresh new blood, as we say, because I'm sure if you ask most people in produce, 90% of them have some kind of link or background to either family or, maybe they've worked their way up through Woolies or Coles and they've ended up on the other side. Or, they've come from a farm themselves. And unfortunately, it just means that our pool gets smaller every year and there's less and less people to choose from. So a way to bring in, some new blood and some new ideas is to look in a different direction. You guys now will have these big companies where you've got marketing departments, you've got the money to spend on innovation. Well, now you need people that is actually their expertise, and maybe they don't have a farming background, but that doesn't mean that they can't bring something new and exciting to the industry. And hey, I mean, like Tim said, I mean, that whole sitting with Nellie thing, that was basically my upbringing as far as learning about the fruit and veg. But if you look at the management side and the structure and where I would like to see our company go into the future, well, I had to draw on my tertiary education and my other corporate work to help in that department. So it's a little bit of a balance of both, but going forward into the future, I do believe that people need to look in a non-traditional area for horticultural in order to make sure that we're all still here and happening in the next 10 years. So thank you.
Thanks, Summer. And just to highlight both Summer and Lucasz, who I'll introduce shortly, their background is, as you've heard, is not in agriculture. And so for Lucasz Gorajek, who's currently the Special Projects Manager for Avanti Fresh Produce, and I'll get him to talk about some of the special projects that he's working on, just to give you an idea, again, of the diversity. Lukasz's qualifications are a BA, Bachelor of Business, and I think you're working on a Masters of Marketing at the moment. So it's completely different to, I suppose, what Tim and I have been used to as we came through the industry. Lucasz is a relative newcomer to the industry, and when I said to him, what attracted you to the industry, he said, well, I wasn't attracted, I fell into it. So he might, a bit like Summer talked about, a three months job that's now been going for long service leave qualification. Lucasz, not only have you worked in the industry in Melbourne, also your experience in the industry in Adelaide, in the produce industry, but from a different perspective again. So please welcome Lucasz Gorajek.